Ladies and gentlemen of the jury,
Quiet, please.
my jury instructions will only take about 20 minutes. However, in that 20 minutes, I'm going to give you a 3-year law school education. But the only way I can do it, Jesse, take this thing away. I can't see all of it. The only way I can do that is if I have your 100% undivided attention. Now, it's one thing to sit back and listen to lawyers give final arguments because their discussions are mainly on a factual basis and not on a legal basis. Although in this case, lawyers have given you a lot of the law that I'm going to give you. But they gave it to you in a different context than I am. I'm giving you the law that you must follow in order to bring back a lawful verdict. So please give me your complete attention. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being one of the most attentive juries I've had. It's been a relatively short trial. We spent more time in jury selection than we did in the trial, which is very, very unusual. Yahweh ben Yahweh, Dexter Liam Grant, also known as Abiri Israel, James Lewis Mack, also known as Jesse Obed, and Ernest Lee Jones, also known as Ahinadad Israel, the defendants in this case, have been accused of the crimes of first-degree murder. Dexter Liam Wright, also known as Abiri Israel, James Lewis Mack, also known as Jesse Obed, and Ernest Lee James, also known as Ahinadad Israel, have been accused of the crime of kidnapping. When there are lesser included crimes, in considering the evidence, you should consider the possibility that although the evidence may not convince you that the defendants committed the main crime of which they are accused, since there may be evidence they committed other acts that would constitute a lesser included crime. Therefore, if you decide that the main accusation has not been proved beyond a reasonable doubt, you will next need to decide if the defendants are guilty of any lesser included crime. The lesser included crimes indicated in the definition of first-degree murder are second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and manslaughter. The lesser included crime indicated in the definition of kidnapping is false imprisonment. In this case, Yahweh ben Yahweh and or Dexter Leon Grant, known as Abiri Israel, James Lewis Mack, also known as Jesse Obed, and or Ernest Lee James, also known as Ahinadad Israel, are accused of murder in the first degree. Murder in the first degree includes the lesser crimes of murder in the second degree, murder in the third degree, and manslaughter, all of which are unlawful. A killing that is excusable or was committed by the use of justifiable deadly force is lawful. If you find that Cecil Branch was killed by Yahweh ben Yahweh and or Dexter Leon Grant and or James Lewis Mack and or Ernest Lee James, you will then consider the circumstances surrounding the killing and deciding if the killing was murder in the first degree or was murder in the second degree or murder in the third degree or manslaughter, or whether the killing was excusable or resulted from justifiable use of force. Justifiable homicide. The killing of a human being is justifiable homicide and lawful if necessarily done while resisting an attempt to murder or commit a felony upon the defendant, or to commit a felony in any dwelling house in which the defendant was at the time of the killing. Excusable homicide. The killing of a human being is excusable and therefore lawful under any one of the following three circumstances. One, when the killing is committed by accident and misfortune in doing any lawful act by lawful means with usual ordinary caution and without any unlawful intent. Or two, when the killing occurs by accident or misfortune in the heat of passion upon any sudden and sufficient provocation. Or when the killing is committed by accident or misfortune resulting from a sudden combat. If a dangerous weapon is not used, then the killing is not done in a cruel or unusual manner. Dangerous weapon is any weapon when, taking into account the manner in which it is used, is likely to produce death or great bodily harm. I now instruct you on the circumstances must be proved before Yahweh ben Yahweh, Abiri Israel, Jesse Obed, and Hinadad Israel may be found guilty of murder in the first degree or any lesser included crime. Murder in the first degree. There are two ways in which a person may be convicted of first-degree murder. One is known as premeditated murder, and the other is known as felony murder. Before you can find the defendant guilty of first-degree premeditated murder, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. One, Cecil Branch is dead. Two, the death was caused by the criminal act or agency of Yahweh ben Yahweh and or Dexter Leon Grant, also known as Abiri Israel, James Lewis Mack, also known as Jesse Obed, and or Ernest Lee James, also known as Hinadad Israel. Three, there was a premeditated killing of Cecil Branch. Killing with premeditation is killing after consciously deciding to do so. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the killing. The period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the killing. The question of premeditation is a question of fact to be determined by you from the evidence. There will be sufficient proof of premeditation if the circumstances of the killing and the conduct of the accused convince you beyond a reasonable doubt of the existence of premeditation at the time of the killing. Felony murder, first degree. Before you can find the defendant guilty of first-degree felony murder, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. One, Cecil Branch is dead. Two, the death occurred as a consequence of and while Yahweh ben Yahweh and or Abiri Israel and or Jesse Obed and or Hinadad Israel was engaged in the commission of kidnapping. The death occurred as a consequence of and while Yahweh ben Yahweh and or Abiri Israel and or Jesse Obed and or Hinadad Israel was attempted to commit kidnapping. Yahweh ben Yahweh and Abiri Israel and or Jesse Obed and or Hinadad Israel was the person who actually killed Cecil Branch. The Cecil Branch was killed by a person other than Yahweh ben Yahweh. Cecil Branch was killed by a person other than Yahweh ben Yahweh and or Dexter Leon Grant, also known as Abiri Israel, James Lewis Mack, also known as Jesse Obed, and or Ernest Lee James, also known as Hinadad Israel. But Yahweh ben Yahweh and or Dexter Leon Grant, also known as Abiri Israel, James Lewis Mack, also known as Jesse Obed, and or Ernest Lee James, also known as Hinadad Israel, and the person who killed Cecil Branch were principals in the commission of kidnapping. In order to convict the first-degree felony murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove that the defendants had a premeditated design or intent to kill. Murder in the second degree. Before you can find the defendants guilty of second-degree murder as a lesser included offense, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. One, Cecil Branch is dead. Two, the death was caused by the criminal act or agency of Yahweh ben Yahweh and or Abiri Israel, and or Jesse Obed, and or Hinadad Israel. Hope you know that sometimes I put the also knowns in, sometimes I don't, but they're all in the jury instruction. There was an unlawful killing of Cecil Branch by an act eminently dangerous to another and evincing a depraved mind regardless of human life. An act is one eminently dangerous to another and evincing a depraved mind regardless of human life if it is an act or series of acts that, one, a person of ordinary judgment would know is reasonably certain to kill or do serious bodily injury to another, and two, is done from ill will, hatred, spite, or an evil intent, and three, is of such a nature that the act itself indicates an indifference to human life. In order to convict on second-degree murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove the defendants had a premeditated intent to cause death. Murder in the third degree. Before you can find the defendants guilty of third-degree murder as a lesser included offense, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. One, Cecil Branch is dead. Two, the death occurred as a consequence of and while Yahweh Ben Yahweh and or Dexter Leon Grant, also known as Abirio, James Lewis Mack, also known as James Obed, and or Ernest Lee James, also known as Hindered Israel, is engaged in the commission of false imprisonment. B, the death occurred as a consequence of and while Yahweh and or Abiri Israel and or Jesse Obed and or Hindered Israel was the person who actually killed Cecil Branch. I have been handed a note indicating that one of the jurors is taking notes. Please don't take notes. I will answer any questions that you might have later on. I'll explain to you perhaps why I say that. And three, the Cecil Branch was killed by a person other than Yahweh Ben Yahweh and or Dexter Leon Grant and or James Lewis Mack and or Ernest Lee James, but Yahweh Ben Yahweh and or Abiri Israel and or Jesse Obed and or Hindered Israel, and the person who killed Cecil James was your principal in the commission of false imprisonment. It is not necessary for the state to prove the killing was perpetuated by design to effect death. Manslaughter. Before you can find the defendant guilty of manslaughter as a lesser included offense, the state must prove the following two elements beyond a reasonable doubt. One, Cecil Branch is dead, and two, the death was caused by an intentional act of Yahweh Ben Yahweh and or Abiri Israel and or Jesse Obed and or Hindered Israel. Or B, intentional procurement of Yahweh Ben Yahweh, Abiri Israel, Jesse Obed, and or Hindered Israel. Or culpable negligence of Yahweh Ben Yahweh and or Abiri Israel and or Jesse Obed and or Ernest Lee James, also known as Hindered Israel. However, the defendants cannot be guilty of manslaughter if the killing was either justifiable or excusable, as I have previously explained in these terms. To procure means to persuade, induce, prevail upon, or cause a person to do something. I will now define culpable negligence for you. Each of us has a duty to act reasonably toward others. If there is a violation of that duty without any conscious intention to harm, that violation is negligence. But culpable negligence is more than a failure to use ordinary care toward others. In order for negligence to be culpable, it must be gross and flagrant. Culpable negligence is a course of conduct showing reckless disregard of human life and or the safety of persons exposed to its dangerous effects. And such an entire want of care is to raise a presumption of a conscious indifference to consequences which shows wantonness or recklessness or a grossly careless disregard of the safety and welfare of the public, or such an indifference to the right of others as to be equivalent to intentional violation of such rights. A negligent act or omission must have been committed with an utter disregard for the safety of others. Culpable negligence is consciously doing an act or following a route or by threat, confined or abducted or imprisoned Cecil Branch against his will. Dexter Leon Grant, also known as Abiri Israel, James Lewis Mack, also known as Jesse Obed, and Ernest Lee James, also known as Hindered Israel, had no lawful authority to do this. Dexter Leon Grant, also known as Abiri Israel, James Lewis Mack, also known as Jesse Obed, and Ernest Lee James, also known as Hindered, acted with the intent to, one, commit or facilitate the commission of murder, or inflict bodily harm upon or to terrorize the victim or another person. In order to be kidnapping with the intent to commit or facilitate the commission of murder, the confinement, abduction, or imprisonment, A must not be slight, inconsequential, or merely incidental to the felony, and B must not be the kind inherent in the nature of the felony. And C must have some significance independent of the felony, in that it makes the felony substantially easier of commission or substantially lessens the risk of detection. False imprisonment. Before you can find the defendant guilty of false imprisonment as a lesser included offense, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. One, Barry Israel and/or Jesse Obed and/or Trinidad Israel forcibly, secretly, or by threat, confined, or abducted, or imprisoned, or restrained Cecil Branch against his will. Two, Dr. William Grant and/or James Lewis Mack and/or Jesse Obed had no, and/or Ernest Lee James had no lawful authority to do this. And Dr. Leon Grant, also known as Barry Israel, James Lewis Mack, also known as Jesse Obed, and/or Ernest Lee James, also known as Trinidad Israel, acted for any purpose other than to A, commit or facilitate commission of murder, B, inflict bodily harm upon or to terrorize the victim or another person. Aggravation of a felony by carrying a weapon other than a firearm. If you find that Dexter William Grant, also known as Barry Israel, James Lewis Mack, also known as Jesse Obed, and/or Ernest Lee James, also known as Hannah Israel, committed the kidnapping and/or lesser included offense of first-degree murder, and you also find that during the commission of the crime, he carried, displayed, used, threatened to use, or attempted to use a weapon, you should find him guilty of kidnapping and/or lesser included offense of first-degree murder with a weapon. A weapon is legally defined to mean any object that can be used to cause death or inflict serious bodily harm. If you find only that the defendant committed kidnapping or a lesser included offense of first-degree murder, or did not carry, display, use, threaten to use, or attempt to use a weapon, then you should find him guilty only of kidnapping and the lesser included offense. Principles. I left out one, aggravation of felony by carrying a firearm. Find that Ernest Lee James, also known as Trinidad Israel, committed kidnapping. You will also find that during the commission of the crime, he carried, displayed, used, threatened to use, or attempted to use a firearm. You should find him guilty of kidnapping with a firearm. A firearm is legally defined as any weapon, including a starter gun, which is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive. The frame or receiver of any such weapon, any firearm muffler or firearm silencer, any destructive device and/or machine gun. The term firearm does not include an antique firearm unless the antique firearm is used in the commission of a riot, the inciting or encouraging of a riot, or the commission of a murder or armed robbery, an aggravated assault or aggravated battery, or burglary and aircraft piracy, kidnapping, or sexual battery. If you find only that the defendant committed kidnapping but did not carry, display, or threaten to use, or attempt to use a firearm, then you should find him guilty only of kidnapping. Principles. If two or more persons help each other to commit a crime, and the defendant is one of them, the defendant is a principal and must be treated as if he had done all of the things that the other person or persons did. If the defendant, 1, knew what was going to happen, 2, intended to participate actively or by sharing in an expected benefit, and 3, actually did something by which he intended to help to commit the crime. Help means to aid, plan, or assist. To be a principal, the defendant does not have to be present when the crime is committed. Plea of not guilty, reasonable doubt, burden of proof. The defendants have entered a plea of not guilty. This means you must presume or believe the defendants are innocent. The presumption stays with the defendant as to each material allegation in the indictment through each stage of the trial until it has been overcome by the evidence to the exclusion of or beyond a reasonable doubt. To overcome the defendant's presumption of innocence, the state has the burden of proving the following two elements. One, the crime with which the defendants are charged was committed, and two, the defendants are the persons who committed the crime. The defendants are not required to prove anything. Whenever the words reasonable doubt are used, you must consider the following. A reasonable doubt is not a possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. Such a doubt must not influence you to return a verdict of not guilty if you have an abiding conviction of guilt. On the other hand, if after carefully considering, comparing, and weighing all the evidence, there is not an abiding conviction of guilt, or if having a conviction is one which is not stable, but one which wavers and vacillates, then the charge is not proved beyond every reasonable doubt, and you must find the defendant not guilty because the doubt is reasonable. It is to the evidence introduced upon this trial, and to it alone, that you are to look for that proof. A reasonable doubt as to the guilt of the defendant may arise from the evidence, conflict in the evidence, or the lack of evidence. If you have a reasonable doubt, you should find the defendant not guilty. If you have no reasonable doubt,